this video, I'm going to show you growing sprouts in jars versus microgreens in trays. This way you can get a better idea of the difference between the two. For this demonstration, we're going to use our sprout jar kit here and both of these jars. And for our microgreens, we're going to be using 2 of our 7x14 tray kits with the silicone reusable grow medium that they both come with. For now, let's go ahead and remove the blackout sleeves from the sprout jars. And let's remove the humidity domes from the microgreen trays. And it's very important to note that whenever you're sprouting, to always use sterile and clean jars. With the lids removed, these are now ready for seed. For our 2 microgreen trays here, we need to place our grow medium in them. Now our microgreen trays are also ready for seed. For both microgreen trays and both jars, we're going to be using 16 grams of this broccoli microgreen seed from True Leaf Market. Now we're just going to take this seed and dump it into our sprout jar. Repeat the process for the second jar. Now let's measure out the 16 grams of seed for the microgreen trays. I like to mix the mediums with a little bit of water to keep my seeds from bouncing. Both our sprout jars and our microgreen trays are now ready for the next step, which is water. For the 2 sprout jars, we're going to add a little bit of this water and hydrogen peroxide to the jars. When doing this, we're only adding about 2 inches of water to each jar. Now we're going to take those lids and screw them on. Mix them around a little bit to make sure the seeds are all covered in water. And now both of these jars of seed are going to soak for 24 hours. For our 2 microgreen trays, we need to mist both of these trays with some water. You can also use a prophylactic spray to mist them as well during germination. Now that both of my microgreen trays have been watered, it's time to place the humidity dome inverted on top so that it makes contact with the seeds. This will help trap in the humidity to ensure good germination. Now from this point forward, all I have to do is place these 2 microgreen trays on the shelf behind me, and I will come check on them twice a day, morning and evening. And at both of these checkings, I will be misting them with water. As for our sprout jars, we're going to allow these to soak for 24 hours, and I will see you guys tomorrow for the next step. It is day 2, and the seeds in these jars have now been soaking for 24 hours. And it's time to pour out the water, rinse the seeds out, and get them into the next step. Now we're going to apply the blackout sleeves to both jars. Once the blackout sleeves are applied, place them in the stand like this. Now these jars can drain and have good aeration, so that way we don't get seed rot. From this point forward, I'm going to be rinsing and draining these 2 to 3 times throughout the day. And each time I will place them back in the stand just like this. As for our 2 microgreen trays, they're still germinating here on the shelf, and I'm continuing to mist them twice a day. I'll see y'all soon for an update. It is the morning of day 4 for our sprouts and microgreens, and these have been germinating for 3 full days. At this point, I've been rinsing the jars 2 to 3 times per day and then putting them back in their stand. As for the microgreens, I've been misting them twice a day, morning and evening with water. And each time I place my dome back on top just like this in the inverted position. So let's go ahead and come in closer and take a look how both of them are doing. For just a moment, we will remove the blackout sleeve so we can see the germination. And let's also remove the lids. You can probably see between the sprouting jar and the microgreen trays, the germination looks pretty drastic between the 2 methods. As you can see with the sprout jars, the sprouts are beginning to sprout throughout the jar, and we're beginning to see some of those yellow plants coming through the seeds. Over these next few days, that's when these are going to start to look drastically different than how they do right now. Now looking at both of our microgreen trays, we are seeing a lot of germination throughout the entire tray. If we had to compare germination, I'd say that our microgreen trays are actually germinating faster than our sprout jars. And remember, at this point in the grow, I'm just misting these twice a day, morning and evening. Let's go ahead and put our blackout sleeves back on our jars. And now I need to mist these 2 trays because I've already rinsed these this morning. Also, one other thing that I forgot to show you on the microgreen trays is the root structures at this point in germination. Now all I have left to do is put my lids back on because we're not quite ready for the next step on these microgreen trays. I'll see y'all soon for the next step on our microgreen trays. It is day 5 for our microgreens and sprouts. First, let's start by looking at our jars today. I know we just checked them yesterday, but they're already looking drastically different than what you saw. So first, let's remove those blackout sleeves. And these are our 2 sprout jars today. Just like I told you yesterday, these look way different and they're going to continue to grow more and more over these next few days. As for our 2 microgreen trays, I can tell that these are ready for their next step. What we need to do is remove both of these, and we're gonna add bottom water to both of these trays after we rinse them out. Now, something that I like to do is I like to take my lid, place my microgreen tray on top like this, and that way I can set it aside without damaging the roots. I'll be right back. All cleaned out and ready for bottom water. Since we're only watering our sprouts with regular water, I'm gonna do the same for my microgreen trays. We will not be adding any fertilizers. I added 3 cups of water to each of these trays, or basically just filling it just to this little nub on the inside of each tray. Now I'm gonna take my microgreen trays and place them back on top, make sure there's no water flooding the medium, which looks like we're good. And then we're just gonna do a root check to make sure the roots are actually touching the water. Then we're gonna take the trays that were on top like this and flip them into that humidity dome. And now these are ready to go into the light for the very first time. For my lights of choice, I'm gonna be using some blue LED lights. And over these next few days, they're gonna grow taller within this dome, and we're eventually gonna remove it. As for our sprouts, I'm gonna place them back into our blackout sleeves. And then go place this over by my kitchen sink again, and I will continue to rinse these 2 to 3 times per day. As for our 2 microgreen trays, I'm gonna check the water levels twice a day. It is the morning of day 7 for both our sprouts and our microgreens, and these have been growing for 6 full days. For our sprout jars, they are ready to be harvested. As for our microgreen trays, it's time to remove these humidity domes. And now these trays are gonna go directly underneath the light again. And over these next few days, we're gonna see these grow quite a bit more. That's one of the big differences between sprouts and microgreens, is microgreens are older than sprouts. Before I put these trays back onto my shelf, I'm gonna refresh the water in the bottom. And I also wanna take a closer look at them. Taking a look at our 2 sprout jars, we are nice and full, and it is definitely ready for harvest day. Last night, one thing I did was remove some of those seed holes to make today a little bit easier. As for our microgreens, they have greened up quite a bit and they're at a great height. That's why today we're going to be removing that humidity dome. First thing I need to do is refresh that water. To do this, I'm going to utilize those lids and place my microgreens on top. And now let's go refresh this. And now I'm going to add new water to the bottom of these trays. And remember, we're just using regular water. There are no nutrients added. And we no longer need these humidity domes. While we're here, let's take a look at the roots. And now I'm just going to take both trays and place them back underneath my lights. And over the next few days, our microgreens will continue to grow. Now let's get into harvesting our sprouts. Some of the supplies that you'll need is a bowl and some kind of strainer. I personally also like to have an additional bowl and another strainer set aside, plus something to scoop any of those seed holes out of my water. Normally, I like to harvest these at my kitchen sink, but today for presentation reasons, we're going to be doing it here. The first thing I need to do is fill this bowl up with some water. And now we can begin harvesting. I'm going to start with one jar. We're going to take the sprouts in this jar and dump them into the bowl with water. Our goal now is to help get these seed holes removed. As you can see, there's barely any in this. In fact, a lot of them are in our other bowl. So let's take these and set them aside. Now let's do the same thing with our second jar. So what I would do now is empty this out and refill it with more water. Then we're going to repeat these steps. Now that we have a fresh bowl of water, let's put our sprouts back in the bowl. The goal is to rinse your sprouts while also removing as many of those seed holes as possible. And you may need to repeat this process 2 to 3 times. Now that we've rinsed and drained these a few times, I'm going to take these over to my sink real quick and give them one more rinse. After rinsing, I'm going to return them to this bowl setup like this, so that way that water that is on our sprouts can start to drain. Now that we've harvested our sprouts, rinsed them, removed those seed holes, and given them time to drip dry, it is time to store them. When it comes to storing sprouts, you really want to make sure you control that moisture. Technically, if you have something like a salad spinner, that would have worked a lot quicker than this method. To store our sprouts and keep them fresh, we're going to take an airtight container and some paper towels are going to be used for moisture control. Just like this. Now I can take my sprouts and place them on top of that paper towel, spread them out, and we're going to take the other paper towels and do the same thing except for place them on top. Close it up, and now my sprouts are ready to go in my fridge and be used for meals. And once a day, I like to change out those paper towels. That way we keep it fresh and control that moisture within this container. One of the key differences between sprouts and microgreens is sprouts can only last a few days in the fridge, whereas microgreens can sometimes last a few weeks. That's why with your sprouts, you want to use them as quickly as possible. That, and each time you go to use them, it's important that you rinse them as well. And you really want to control that moisture in this container to keep them as fresh as possible. That way you minimize the risk of any contamination whenever you're eating your freshly grown sprouts. Anyways, y'all, I'm gonna put these sprouts in the fridge, and over these next few days, we're gonna continue to follow along with our microgreens. Day 9. Today is day 10 for both of our microgreen trays, and it's time to harvest both of them. So what we're going to do now is get our harvesting materials out and harvest both of these trays. When it comes to harvesting microgreens compared to sprouts, you'll typically use a bowl with some kind of bag to harvest into. That, and you'll use a knife as your tool to harvest with. Another thing that you may notice that's different as well is that microgreens, you'll typically weigh them because many people sell them. Compared to sprouts, they're usually just used for personal consumption, so you don't need to weigh them. Gently grab the microgreens and begin harvesting. Whenever you're harvesting microgreens, you stay just above the medium. And these are broccoli microgreens. They're a little bit older than sprouts, and as you can tell, they're green. For this first tray, we got 195.9 grams of fresh broccoli microgreens. Now let's harvest our second tray. For this tray, we're just repeating the process. And this tray got us 166.3 grams of fresh broccoli microgreens. Now that I'm done harvesting my microgreens, what I would do is remove these leftover roots and stems. But first, I like to pour out the water in the bottom of my trays. To remove the roots and stems, I would use the tool like our scraper here. Unless I'm using coco coir or soil, then I would just knock out all the medium in the tray. Most of the time, I find it easier with reusable grow mediums to start on the backside first. This way it loosens up the roots and makes it easier for the stems to come out. With the roots and stems removed, I would take my grow mediums here, wash and sanitize them, and then they can be reused. And same with both of our microgreen trays. We would clean and sanitize them for reuse. Another thing that's different about microgreens compared to sprouts, whenever it comes to all these leftovers, you compost them. Unlike sprouts, you typically eat both the stem and the root, as well as the leaves. The main reason people don't typically eat the roots and stems of microgreens is that microgreens are grown in soil or a growing medium, which can have dirt, microbes, or even mold around the roots. Sprouts, on the other hand, are grown in water, making the entire plant cleaner and safer to consume. Additionally, microgreen roots can be tougher or more fibrous compared to the tender roots of sprouts. And that's why we just compost this. As for storing my microgreens, I just like to take my bag and put it into my fridge. And typically with microgreens, you want to consume them within a week. However, some varieties can last an entire month. And the main thing whenever you keep them in the fridge is you want to make sure that they don't get too humid as well as too cold. For instance, you don't want your microgreens pushed to the back of the fridge because if they're at the back of the fridge, the likelihood of them getting frostbitten is very high. Fun fact, I actually made that mistake during our wedding week. I had grown a bunch of microgreens that I wanted to make beautiful salads with, and well, I accidentally pushed them to the back of the fridge, and nearly half of my microgreens ended up having to be tossed out because they got so cold that they died off in the bag. That was a major mistake and definitely a good reminder of why I try not to push them to the back of the fridge. Luckily, I still had a few bags that were near the front of the fridge that made it. Now let's go ahead and take a look at these slides I made, and we'll compare the nutrients for both the sprouts and the microgreens. Well, y'all, I hope that you enjoyed learning the differences between growing broccoli sprouts versus growing broccoli microgreens. What I love about both sprouts and microgreens is they're super easy to grow, anyone can do it, they take very limited space, and they're super good for you. And I hope that this video inspired you to try them. Anyways, y'all, I'll see you on the next video.